Good afternoon. Once again, we coming to the discussion or sharing uh, my four basic platforms. I can bring this forward, backward, but every time I will briefly share with my audience, my future collaborators, colleagues, and whatnot. Is all in a school of thoughts. 74, 75, I have established the system called 3Cs, which involving communication dynamic, communication analytica, what holds the two spheres of influences all of our counseling psychologists is the the area we're covering called the cultural sphere. With time, the cultural spheres start evolving. 74, 75, 76, I was searching for a doctoral program to host this brand new concept of counseling. What I already had in mind is a counseling, and the language of the 3Cs is a universal language which we can share with any people, any cultural groups without the barrier of the language of psychology. This particular 3Cs has since 50 years, 45 years later, evolved into my returning back to the educational, back to my counseling psychology field, where I have added the cultural aspects of my latest awareness of my Chinese heritage and very much part of the understanding of the psychology of round and square, which for the Chinese, called Tian, sky, Di is the earth. And then the whole history of China's evolving on the interchange of sphere development from round to square, square to round. Or make it very simple, even in linguistically, we talk about law and order. Law is the law, order is the order. How is another way trying to express this concept of the psychology round and square? It's very simple. We all play sports. Okay, I play many years. I'm still playing tennis. I play soccer for the college, volleyball, ping pong, table tennis. The ball is round, but the law, of the law, using the character L also, you can see you play within a square. Once the ball gets moving in a soccer field, you can shoot the ball high as you want. Same thing as tennis, or even let's take ping pong, badminton, and whatnot. So it's a very simple way for me to understand and how I have evolved since 1977 and now back to the educational area of my concern and the full development of psychology round and square. The reason is such that I have very good exposure education by way of the Roman Catholic order in Brazil. And before that, before I was 14, from 8 to 14, I was also attending the Roman Catholic school in Macau by the Salesians. Many of you know the order from Turin or Torino. They call it Don Bosco, D-O-M Bosco, and another part of the world, Don Bosco can be written as D-O-N, like Mr. Sir. So what I'm going back is into these four spheres, the psychology round and square today, and moving forward, what is with me on the side is also the conscientization of Paulo Freire. And after I defining the conscientization by Paulo Freire, I look backward into my culture, and I found the teaching of Wang Yangming in the 14th century, 1500, during the Ming era. Again, just by another pure coincidence, Wang Yangming is And I and my family, my father's family, share the same heritage from the little village called Yuyao next to Ningbo. Today, Yuyao is a suburb of the city of Ningbo. So we talk about consciencology, conscience. And as of yesterday and today, a new terminology had come up to me involving with all the psychology of round and square, the cosmic psychology of three C's, consciencology of Wang Yangming, and conscientization Paulo Freire. Okay, and I want my audience pay a little great attention to this mingling. You can, if you look at this all into a sphere, if they can overlap, there's no dimension. On this note, we can also talk about in my engagement since 1991 with the internet, with the spreadsheets of Microsoft and whatnot, to the Web 2.0, to the blockchain in the period of Ethereum, and now we are into the AI, and more than that. By this stacking of the spheres, now this will also be very suitable into the coming up and coming the cultural zone called spatial web. Okay, and so what I have come up yesterday in trying to define how can we find solutions to our conflicts, our problems, be that interpersonal or intrapersonal or international or intercultural. It's very simple. I found myself to be a very pragmatic person, and problem solving is always a challenge. If I have overcome in this last 45 years engaged in the most interesting and yet can be the most mistrusted industry involving diamond colored gemstones, valuables, antiques, collectibles, specimens, minerals. And these are the hundreds and millions of sums of value. So the game of deception continued. But now we also found a solution in my development system called Jam Files, which on the page in Facebook of GGMBA, much can be shared. So when I get back to this problem solution in the dealing of the subject matter called conscience, and what is interesting is has always been very obvious to us, to most of the Chinese, and when I'm speaking in this case, also about my Chinese colleagues. We are frequently been told, advised since we were youngsters. I lived in Macau with my sisters, two sisters, my mother, and my two aunts, whose husbands were with the regime of the Chiang Kai-shek nationalist Chinese government, were captured. One was executed, the other was imprisoned, later released. And so instead of thinking about Tom Sawyer, again, here, this will involve a little bit of story, imagination about, I would talk about also Monkey King, depending on the time here. The right and wrong is a constant presence among us. Now, this what I'm saying is alerting this conscious awareness amongst my Chinese friends, colleagues, no matter what age. And when we're naughty, our aunt's calling us Malao, monkey in Cantonese. So we're very, very acquainted with the presence of the Monkey King, and the story of the Monkey King was fascinating. Who can imagine one summer saw you can go around 100,008 miles? Well, in the mileage and the count of a league in the Chinese time and era, and also in the Song Dynasty. Again, there's another cultural sphere. When I'm talking of miles in present time, and then the mile and count of the league or of the mile is a totally different tabulation. But regardless, in split seconds, I can be anywhere. in split seconds, I can go from, let's say, Brazil to Africa and then back to China, as I did with my gem trade. 18 hours flight from Brazil to South Africa, Johannesburg, where there was 8 hours, no food, and catch another flight from Johannesburg to Hong Kong and did the show, spoke to the television personality, spoke for the TV on behalf of the 26th first group of exhibitors showing gemstones and minerals in Hong Kong. I think it's 1983, but this all can be identified and verified by the procurement backdating. But what I'm trying to say, the psychology of round and square has always been in my mind because I traverse through these languages from Chinese to Portuguese with the Latin and Greek exposure by the Roman Catholic Church and the boarding school, and then from Brazil to Portuguese to my personal interest. I took on Spanish, and from Spanish, Portuguese, the easy handling, acquiring another group, Italian. I may not speak perfect, maybe 60%, Portuguese 90%, Spanish 85%, regardless the percentage point. The fluency and struggling to have to learn the language for most people, I myself found it absolutely fascinating. Just to be saying, catching on my Hispanic friends from Mexico when they're doing broadcasting in Brazil, they say, "Oh, it's so difficult for us to say São Paulo," because they will have a tendency to say Sao Paulo, SAO almost, American likewise. But for my first 5 years in Shanghai, the tonality of the Shanghai dialect is very nasal. They call it you. How are you? No, how are no, now. The nasal part comes with yeast. But in the problem solving, where the psychology, the language of psychology of Sigmund Freud from his Germanic language group from Austria is difficult. Plus, Sigmund Freud already had done what I have done. Much of it is the cross-culturally. And I was still wondering if he is a very, very much of a traditional Jewish personality, where and why he drew his psychological dimensions, be he's a psychosexual, be that pleasure principle with Oedipus complex, and within all his fixations from oral, anal, genital, you can add on to it. I'm not poking fun, but the language already coming out from the Greek basis, and from German to English, and from English to Portuguese, and from Portuguese, I have always in my mind, from since I was 16 years old, my interest with the indigenous language in Brazil. We all know many words in the Portuguese language in Brazil because we have identities of the Tupi language and the Guarani. If you talk about anybody about ITA, Ita, that stone. Okay, and then with this in mind, with my work and with education, I have always thinking about how can I bring my development of the 3C system in 1974, 75, 76 to the place like Brazil, to the indigenous, or even to China. Because it's very simple. By me adopting the Freudian 3 ego states, superego, culture, ego, I, and then ID is the human biological needs, physiological needs, and then boom, bingo, being played by Eric Burns' transactional analysis, where he put the voices of the parent, the voices of the adult, more reason, and then the child, which is a natural child, can be adaptive child. So here the elements of rational, irrational, reason, or showing already had reduced a part of the Freudian psychological language or linguistics into a much open form, and very much not just Eric Burns, from Rollo May to Alfred Adler and for other people who have also are familiar with the psychological educators like, I am embracing totally, or Carl Rogers. Other have the attachment to Fritz Perls, but whatever, whomever, and I will put this also to the testimony in all these 50 plus years. The only time ever a little bit of the Asiatic value put into the middle of the mix was Eric Fromm, who himself, again, is a Germanic Jewish psychologist, and put his work, basically the Suzuki from Japan, speaking of his concept of Zen, and then Eric Fromm is expressing the context about psychoanalysis. But I still find it very much rewarding when there was the first time there was Asian value, namely Chinese. As most of you should know, Japan, with over 60% of their characters are written in Hanji, or the character of the Han Chinese. I'm not, I'm not sure what development of the Japanese culture would be, or this is since the Tang Dynasty. But all in all, I'm not here to put right or wrong, and I'm criticize the Freudian psychology, because I do credit Sigmund Freud had pioneered, regardless his heritage being Jewish, not being accepted as the Vienna School, the medical school, and the whole theory and his hypothesis had given ground to the field of psychology. But now, because my personal exposure to the linguistic side of things, and even in the linguistic term of psychology, that word psyche, not created by Freud, but at the time in an era of that tendency of the scholars embracing the Greek culture. Of course, if you look back one more time, the Renaissance in Italy is basically the Italian culture looking back to the other part, the other part of their ancient history, and looking for the Greek era and how much they have benefit, by the Italian Renaissance. But all in all, I have always wanted the work in the counseling field. The success I have created from 74 to 76 until we opened our private business 77, we just had to take off. And this sounds like kind of funny. Did I abandon my field? No. I was 28, 29, and I wanted some financial independence. And I could not land my 3 C's into a doctoral program. As many advisors have told me, Paul, you cannot find a school. You get to have your thesis and your hypothesis to be accepted by a graduate school and create a system. And why this, I found the system, the bureaucracy being a little a little bit too much. And with my evaluation, where my wife and I had planned it 9 months academic work, 3 months summer, with my experience seeing other university faculty developing private interest counseling, therapy, or even private business, my role to be in a college setting is that I can have my 3 months off to explore other opportunities. Yes, even to be profitable. We have university faculties at my old school owning restaurants and doing other food services, and I was part of that. So 77, now this jump from a successful counseling system that can go global, we took off to a totally different zone. But with my personal interest and my wife, Kathy, our interest with the fascination of the color of gemstones, with, well, diamonds, not so much. Diamonds become part of the package, but the minerals. We walk around the tri-state area from Iowa to Minnesota to Illinois, to Wisconsin, and we have an idea about what we can do, what we would like to do with my access. So For me, jumping from psychology with a master's degree into the gemstone business in Brazil, I can show this as part of the illustration for those Chinese who are familiar with the story of the Monkey King. I jumped into the waterfall. In Portuguese, a paulyih cerca. I jumped into the cataratas, where I found the most fascinating ambience. And I have continued on in 45 years, even today, with my engagement to the rocks, mineral, gemstones, collectibles. And I took all this business into Hong Kong, into Macau, into China. I was one of the first pioneers to move Brazilian gemstones into Hong Kong and then Bangkok, and with my own factory located by the border in the Golden Triangle up in Chiang Mai. At that particular time in Ponza, a very risky area, but there was a German factory with the folks from either Oberstein I know. They have to leave the factory because they do not have enough material to sustain the cutters, the lapidaries or lapidary in Chiang Mai, in a town called Mesai, right by the border between Thailand and Burma, now Myanmar. However, the entire 45 years of travel and linguistic plus business had taken me into every continent, from Nigeria to Mozambique, from Brazil to Uruguay with our venture, to Bolivia, to Peru, and to all around Central America. In 1973, even before I graduated from my master's degree, I visited Guatemala, and the first one to explore the jadeite in North America. And in my years with the business, we have bought burial pieces, the most gorgeous pieces of jade, not nephrite, jadeite, like from Burma, from Thailand, amongst the natives. When they were intruded by the Spaniard, they saved their jade and give up their gold. So there are many, many collectibles, there are many beautiful pieces. What I have really enjoyed is the entire exploration. I personally do not want to buy from them because it was like a taking advantage of the possessions. But the entire traveling from Cancun to Campeche and to the area where the Mayans were, with the burial sites and the beautiful pieces of jade, which many of you can see from there. You could go to Pinterest, you can see some of the Mayan jade is looking every bit as vivid, not made as translucent as the jade from Burma, but to be able to get engaged into the trade. And plus my personal curiosity, plus the linguistic side of it, I am still searching with that one stone found among the Brazilians, the matriarchal, in the common terminology, people used to call them the Amazon women in northern Pará, where that one stone took me 6 months to research by the name of Moira Titan, first in its German written format with K and T, and later on we found out that is the amulet, the Amazon women. I'm using a colloquial term. This women tribes is their mating or in the springtime with their male boyfriend, lovers, and is an amulet in the shape of a small animal looking like a frog. And the one piece is still in the museum in Pará, in the possession of the museum. I trust him as Gaudi, but I have not the chance to look for that stone. If that stone is supposed to be green, and if it's jade or jadeite, and that may be able to prove that the Mayans and the Aztecs may have some sort of communication or exchange, because the wild imagination of tabulating the stone coming down from the Peru, from the Solomon River to the shorelines and coming to the side of the Amazon, if that stone is green, indeed, if that stone is from Guatemala, okay? Because in my entire life, there are hardly any hard stones in green in that form, not emerald, not the aventurine green quartzite, or the tourmalines, not in that particular shape, form, and the translucency, the texture of the jades are totally different than what is in the rest of the green stones that we found in South America. So my 45 years of the gem trade was not only engaged in the business, but logistically, I have done my job, but in a very humble and modest manner. I have created my first couple millions of profit by handling only one color, which is purple, which is quartz, which is called amethyst. But by me able to have a good study of the many mines in Brazil, come to 30, 40 different mines, but the major productions coming up from Brejinhos up in the Bahia, up in the northern part where I stayed in Minas, and then in one mine, again from Pará, called Marabá, had captured me there 3 years with a similar stone. Have taken those stones into the market in Europe, North America, Asia. In the meantime, the study of the amethyst allowed me to go into the total opposite point, to the southernmost part of Brazil, in the state called Rio Grande do Sul, the Greek state from the south, and in the region where the major amethysts have been produced in the area called Iraí, and in the city called Soledade. By observing, studying their process, how they obtain the rough, how the rough is being hammered out, not saw, so the stone is crystal clear, and speed up the convenience for the cutters in Germany then, or the German subcontract into other regions in Brazil. And eventually, this methodology of stone rough hammering out of the matrix and hammering down to be 100% clean crystals in the sizes from 0.2 gram all the way up to the big sizes, maybe the largest size in general, maybe about 5 grams. And occasionally you get a stone with 1 or 2 to 10 and above. And the stones have to be the orientation of the stones is totally different than the amethyst from the north. And in this process, maybe with my degree, after my master's degree, and my always fascinating about logistics and about organizational skills, my exposure have given me the perspective with the $1 per carat stone that I can produce, to produce in the domains I have. And I've taken the entire stone system, first to New York, then Los Angeles, and from Los Angeles, New York, Chicago, where I based, and then eventually taken into Hong Kong, and from Hong Kong to Bangkok. In fact, when I first started selling amethyst, I was almost being laughed at by the quote unquote the elites, looking at my one bag of 50,000 carats of amethyst, almost 5 kilos of stones. So at 5 is only $250,000. But a 5 to 10 carat ruby, you're talking about tripling the value. So you go through all sorts of the human vanity, ego, pride, carrying bags and bags of stones, while the other one selling one stone, a diamond, can be in hundreds of thousands, if not millions. But I went through all that. But in knowing what I carry, what I have in my possession, and what can I do with my stones, I put the stones eventually into all the cruise ships in Carnival, North America. I become friends with the people who had the first global magazine marketing loose gemstones called the Sharper Image, with the magazines on every spot of the world, and yet modestly in a small town, Little Rock, Arkansas, is where we shipped our stone to them, and so were they respecting my little town, Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, population 3,800, now is 7,000. So in this perspective, what I have done in my business had also enriched my development of my first discovery of the 3C system, and then the cultural sphere. Just continue to elaborate. When I'm in Sao Paulo City, I have another composure. There's a cultural sphere. Many of us would say, Paul, should we share more story with me about your experience in Sao Paulo? And I had to think and rethink. But because the creation of the cultural sphere, I can create more tapes or sharing more by using the cultural sphere where I grew up. Okay, so I grew up in the southern zone of Sao Paulo, or Zona Sul, where I swam for the club Hebraica in Hebrew, in my part of 15, 20 minutes away. And then I played basketball for the club called Pinheiros. And yet I've always frequented 2 blocks away from my house, the Clube Paulistano. And the age in my time, we drive up and down the Rua Augusta to Avenida Paulista to the region, mingle with the students from the American graded school, the British graded school, English school, to the American chapel school, with the young youth mixed in with our many cultural diverse team. In one room in my household, my father can be speaking French fluently with his schoolmates, Chinese, ethnic Thai, and ethnic Burma, and their spouses who are French. And the mahjong table on the other room, my mother was speaking Cantonese with her partners in the games. And among the youngsters, we jumped from English to Portuguese, back and forth. And in my club, with the thousands of ethnic Jewish people, I started my swimming with a team, mostly Hungarians. That in the group, in the club, a table can speak in German, another can be speaking Yiddish. I still remember in the 60s when the Sephardic Jews coming from Egypt before the Egyptian conflict. There were multiple languages spoken. And in my neighborhood, my neighbor behind me were the Jewish people from Shanghai who used to own the Snow White ice cream manufacturing in Shanghai. And to my right is the German colonel with 7 noblemens. So live in the Sao Paulo, when you can talk about cloud, where are you? Oh, I'm from this bairro, I'm from this zone, I'm from Morumbi, I'm from Mocha, I'm from downtown. In my work with the cultural sphere, and again, this early on, I have to have the respect to a certain cultural groups and the entity. Japantown sticks to Chinatown. And this early diversity in Sao Paulo also reflecting me back to the Macau and Hong Kong days. My only exposure, the foreign language was Latin and Greek. Portuguese, Italian spoken, I heard over English classes. And then tracing back to my childhood, before I was 5, the language, the tonality I have exposed from my family. The Cantonese from my mom, raised in Guangxi, where she spoken a certain kind of a linguistic, but the official Chinese language called Gunhua in Cantonese, or Guanhua. And then my father and my paternal grandmother, they spoke their dialect from Yuyao, from Zhejiang. And in the household staff, they can be from Pudong. Many were known from the northern part of the Shanghai River, the Yangtze River, basically naming Suzhou, Jiangsu, and Hangzhou. So the multiple language had given me, imagine like a baby, you're trying to capture the sound, what it meant, what is being said. And in that psychological or mental wrestling of sounds and tones had given me the certain kind of agility and ability to handle the multiple languages. So I'm grateful to that. All about exposure. So I will put this exposure of 45 years of the business had not lessening what I have today, and about my returning to think of a global language, one language of counseling by the three shapes. That's why square, be careful. If you make an opinion about me, a stronger opinion, you can be squaring me in. Wow, Paul is. But in my development of the round sphere is always the background, and then during the conversation, during the transactions, TA, during the communications, the shapes that move around from square to round to triangle. Triangle is the distortion of the square. The triangle can mean both were fighting and arguing in the shape of an arrow or in the shape of pointing fingers. And by what I'm perceiving in today's political sphere, be that here in North America or in Brazil, we have this very similar situations between Biden and the Democratic Party, between Bolsonaro and Lula. 90% of the time, we no longer have a dialogue. We only judge, or we frame, we square. So you can frame people. And also in my use of a color, the color intensity means how tense or how dense or how transparent and translucent. So we can ease off our prejudices, we can ease off our judgments. Another body language, why I'm talking about body language, is when we're pointing a finger. I just learned from the other day from Facebook somewhere. When you're pointing finger, when you're judging, the other three fingers pointing back at you. And this is part of the development of my yesterday, today. What I have learned about psychology round and square make me think back my history and the Chinese very original concept of the sky is round and the land is square. And that is the Chinese duality, the yin yang sign. You see the black and the white, and then in the black there's a dot of white, and in the white there's a dot of black. So the Chinese idea about one have the many way to look at it. And so the psychology round and square, now I can take it into the villages of the Indian tribes. So I have spent time in northern part of Brazil in São Gabriel de Cachoeira with my Roman Catholic bishop, ethnic Chinese, Don Songi, in 2008 when I turned 60. So this variety of experience had enriched much more my psychological learning into a cultural, anthropological life experience, how to apply psychology round and square. And you will see from my website, www.paulyih.ai, Paul and then YIH. My last name is very simple to remember. Just think about young, intelligent, and handsome. Well, I take a little bit of that Italian vanity as part of the cultural endorsement by using my name, YIH, young, intelligent, and handsome. Because my travel, most American want to book a hotel, and I couldn't find my name because phonetically they write down my name is WIH. So to make the people having a stronger remark for my last name, so I say young, intelligent, and handsome. That was 50 years ago, and now I'm 76. Vanity or not, In this last 45 years of global travel, in the human dynamics of communication with a ton of deception, the business I'm in, or I was in, for me is a constant role-playing game. From the jungles of Brazil, from my gem trading tables in Minas Gerais, to the shows, exhibitions in Tucson, Arizona, in all the cities, moving around with expensive, costly, and high-risk merchandise. It is a show of almost the movement of a spy or a secret agent, how we travel in and out of the city, um, and handling the people I handle with a back statue sitting on my showroom in Tucson can cost $2 to $3 million, versus in the other cases, a bag of diamonds can worth that much versus my 1 kilos, 5,000 carats of stones. So quantity, variety, and when you're exposed to the constant economic shifts, because my discovery of one mine had allowed me to be on the same parallel of the German mineral find of amethyst at the same price. Where my cost is $1, his cost maybe 2 to 3, and yet the selling price about 5. And so you have constantly this psychological and economically alert. And so who is the next paulyih find another mine with the production of the goods, giving the result of the similar color? Maybe the cost is 50 cents. So this kind of a business mindset, operating, thinking. So then you have to know, when do I want to liquidate and when I want to get out of this particular grouping of the gemstones, when there's another group is found and they can saturate the market, which happens with the finding of the wonderful, beautiful so-called tourmaline, Paraíba tourmaline, with the presence of gold, platinum, whatever, say, from the northern part of Brazil. Eventually, there was similar tourmaline found in Mozambique. Similar stone were found in west part of Africa, Nigeria. And I have walked the aquamarine found in Nigeria by putting their merchandise into Thailand and Hong Kong. I have basically, not by my choice, collapsed the aquamarine value being held in either Oberstein. Some of the stocks shows 150 years of the history, the big crystal. And this is where I learned, not just from a culture of education, counseling, one-on-one or group therapy. I'm learning also actively in a live environment. When you're in the middle of a show, it looks wonderful, but you also think about the 60 to 100 other competitors looking at your success with envy, and they will find a way to surpass your value cost merchandise. It's a live market. I don't have the luxury to make hypotheses and study and survey. I'm living an everyday economic survival of the economy and with my products. But deep inside me, this entire exposure had enriched my perception of life. And that's why I'll make the real short comment about today, what I have discovered just yesterday and today. And doing what? By me asking Claude, Gemini, ChatGPT, phrase my language about in what I'm searching about the title to create the pedagogy of conscience. This can lead to a future global, international, I hope, for more better engagement with harmony and peace. Because conscience is not a methodology. Conscience is not something mechanically you can teach people conscience. Conscience is the byproduct of the intense thinking. It is a thinking most wisely. Thinking with conscience is to eliminate the negativity when we first take it from knowledge into intelligence. In my gem tree, I exercise all my intelligence, directly or indirectly. My intelligence had outpaced the other existing economy, such like I found my mine, find a stone, lower cost than the Germans, and I have the market. But I'm trying my best not to affect or hurt anybody else. That means I became a dominant player. I like playing cards. I have the chips. I can sell, I can consign, I can give them credit, sell, they pay me, and I can build up more of my stock. Intelligence is where we have trouble with. Self-serving intelligence, but self-serving by not harming others is one thing. But self-serving and damaging, and I say bluntly, the war industry. If you have to kill to be profitable, you got to sell more bombs, more guns. You are doing something wrong. By me, that's ethically wrong and morally wrong. And to my own amazement, as of yesterday, I raised my question not to my colleagues, not to any department of philosophy. And yet I think of every day about the philosophical values. Since the Greeks, 500 BC, just like Confucius, just like Buddha by way of India, just like Lao Tzu. What then have not been said, and where I have discovered a new front of education? This is where I have found the pedagogy of conscience can become a discipline, can be taught, because it is the level of thinking. Let's go back to the old way. We think from the minute we wake up, 24/7, 365. That means if you don't sleep. In today's language, we can call it in nanoseconds. And this is precisely what the Greek had fostered also, but predominantly the teaching of Confucius. In his time, 500 BC, in the same era, 7,000 students, or 3,000 students, think about it, but 700 close to his close quarter in this inner circle. Confucius' teaching plus Lao Tzu's teaching and Buddha, which is more about compassion of people, they're all addressing the same. The human kindness. To be kind, have the extra benefit that you become good. And conscience is the language of the hearts. They all speak from their hearts. And now this allows me another exploration in many of the language not written by our American natives in South America, Central America, or North American. But they all speak, many of them speak with the language of the hearts. Confucius mostly talking about the rituals by him following the Zhou dynasty, one of the most prosperous, prominent dynasty before Confucius. Confucius was born in the Warring States. He has been fostering those rituals, fostering those ideas, what it takes to be a good man, self-established, then home, family, and then country, nation, and then the world, all in the language, in the harmony and engagement in what we do. Lao Tzu is basically the first ecologist. talking about respecting nature, showing us why men looking forward to go up to mountains so you can see further. But like water, you want to go down to the lowest valley, and water is such a powerful force, and yet it takes in our human dirts, our laundry, our human waste, our dumping, and all this contrasting exposure of the school of thoughts of Lao Tzu and his follower Zhuangzi, and then Mencius follow Confucius, and the teaching of Buddha. All of them are addressing to cultivate the language of the heart, which is conscience. And in the West, we know of conscience early on, from the Homer's Iliad to the Greek parables, and all the way to Jimmy the Crickets of Walt Disney. Or we all know about how Socrates was killed by the tyrants there in Athena. Why? They were speaking of a democracy. We all know about, if you open Google, you just Google conscience quotes. I have my favorite authors, from Victor Hugo, by the exposure of my father's French literature, to Charles Dickens, to Mark Twain, just basically talk about humanists. There's always stories talk about or quotes about conscience. Conscience like a pillow. You can sleep so gently, so softly. You're not worried about anything else. And yet, where is the conscience awareness? Where is the conscience education that we can do? And after all these long periods, I found two men in the contemporary time and my time in the 60s to the 70s was Paulo Freire of Brazil. And that's the first term I have ever heard talking about conscientization. And somewhere about 1500 or 800 years before him, another man, another scholar who have spoken about conscience, Consciencology, the law of all is resting in our heart. This gentleman's name is Wang Yangming. Wang just so happened share the same village, same origin as my father, from the village called Yuyao, present day a suburb of the city of Ningbo in the province of Zhejiang, just upriver, now about an hour and a half from Shanghai. So many other global scholars, is it not time for us to study this pedagogy of conscience? Because the benefit to being kind, just to make it very simple, when you exercise kindness, is already embracing human goodness. From Paulo Freire's work, they'll be coming to critical psychology, the pedagogy of the oppressed, and Paulo Freire is starting with this very basic idea how education is the vehicle to reduce illiteracy in Brazil. And that happened in 63, 64. And that was the year that I was still in the boarding school. That was the year I broke the São Paulo state record in swimming. That was the same year I remember the mobilization of the military maneuvers. And also remember, somehow in the news, there's a group of Chinese, 6 or 7 of them in Rio, who started the attempt. It's all proven to be bogus. But nevertheless, I'm not going to stand on the issue about wrongs at this moment. But I think the Chinese and the teaching of conscience, or making us alert to be good, to be kind, be that Buddha, be that from Confucius, and be that from Lao Tzu, and the rest of the school coming down from this three school of thoughts. I have yet mentioned another book of goodness and kindness, but in the form, more of in a metaphor called I Ching, and how ancient Chinese in the 5,000 years had conjugated by observing the universe, by observing the stars, the sun's movement seasons, from 2 to 4, from 4 to 6, 6 to 8, and the guidance that embraces both by Confucius, by Lao Tzu. And this have indirectly a total summary. I'm using Wang Yangming as one of the latest scholars from 1500s. And his teaching was admired by many, many Asians above and beyond China, from Vietnam to Japan, Korea. Wang's teaching was widening to most part of Asia. And then you may raise the question as to why not that school of thoughts had continued on to the modern era. And then there will be another two topics I would talk about: how China was formed, how chaotic China was from the 1840 to the Opium War is a point of reference, and to the decline of the Manchu dynasty that dominated China, and to the decline of the Manchu dynasty, and then the Opium War and the humiliation of the defeat. How China had won the war in the First World War, and yet with their territory, their land, the city being taken away because of the Versailles Treaty, and how that Versailles Treaty had triggered the Chinese revolutionaries who wanted absolutely overthrow the Manchu dynasty. Then comes the era of Dr. Sun and the Chinese Republic. And yet there's another painful time and period of the warlords. And from the warlords, the situation worsens with the civil war between Chiang Kai-shek and Mao Zedong, communist and the nationalist China. And in all this chaos, China were not been able to shape from the multiple culture of the Manchus, the Hans, in written language. And finally, in 1948, there was the first time ever China's become a national symbol. The nation of Chinese was formed. And these are the complexities. I have dreamed of the name borrowing from the Jewish diaspora, the exit of the Chinese. They're leaving from Southeast Asia. The Chinese come to America to build railroads. The Chinese were sold to Peru to harvest guanos, the bird poops, and committing suicides. The Chinese went to Jamaica. The Chinese went in Cuba. The Chinese participated with the Cuban Revolution. This whole array of stories, the overseas Chinese can speak and talk about their adventure, their hardship, and their cultural dissonance. That's another term, because the cultural dissonance had also shaped and also muted China for the longest time. Imagine 1973, I got a job from the Taiwan Airlines in Chicago named China Airlines. I was not given the title of sales representative because on my form filling in for China Airlines, I did indicate I have two half-brother and sister still in Shanghai. And because of that particular registry, the company had blocked my full title on grounds of security. Since 1962, we moved to Brazil until in me going back and forth to Brazil into the 70s. My father and the Chinese consulate, I call him Uncle Mao from Taiwan, eventually become the regional ambassador in Guatemala. I visited them also. 73, that was my first time to have gone into, just to know where the jade from Guatemala in Antigua. My father was helping Uncle Mao to wire money from Hong Kong to his two other brothers in China with Mao regime. The long silence since 48, and I'm using 73 as a demarcation, between the Chinese from Taiwan and the Chinese in China have no communications. The in-between are the Chinese from Hong Kong, Macau, or we have access to that area. The long silence, the long hostility, the mutual fighting, harming, hurting like gangs between the October 1st, the celebration of the Chinese mainland national holiday, and the October 10th, the nationalist national holiday. There were gangs in Macau. There were groups in Macau and Hong Kong continuing their hostility with one or another. My family had kept a long-term silence, muted, not to comment about what we had done in Shanghai and what other events had taken place in fear of any kind of retaliation. So I will conclude my say today for those who want to explore about more on the pedagogy of conscience. And I welcome your inquiry. And you can email me, you can Google me, or you can find more my 7 programs listed on paulyih.ai and /PRS for Psychology Round and Square, or the CCI, the Cross Cultural Institute, and other platforms. And I thank you for your time, and I will continue to do these other videos, repetitively in Cantonese, in Chinese, and Chinese, and also in Portuguese. Thank you for your time. Paulo Gustavo. Tá aí?